The air in the apartment was always a little too cool for Jiho's liking. It was set for his flatmate's comfort. He didn't mind much. It was a small price to pay for an affordable place in the massive, humming city. Jiho pushed the door open with his shoulder, his arms full of data tablets and a bag of cheap noodles from the vendor downstairs. The main room was a study in divided habits. One side held his worn, comfortable chair and a messy desk covered in notes for his linguistics degree. The other side, near the large window, was Kale's domain. There, trays of faintly glowing blue fungus grew in neat, silent rows. The light from them made strange shadows on the wall. Kale was there now. They were tall and slender, with skin the color of twilight. They were using a delicate tool to mist the fungus with a fine spray. They did not turn when Jiho entered. This was normal. Kale was quiet, polite, but private. They had shared this space for 4 months with few problems and even fewer real conversations. "Long day," Jiho said to the room, more out of habit than expectation of a reply. He dropped his bag on his chair with a sigh. The city outside was entering its artificial evening, a wash of neon and floating transport lights. It was spring on the sector hub, and the environmental systems were pumping out simulated pollen to help the imported earth plants. Played havoc with Jiho's sinuses. A familiar, itchy feeling began to build behind his nose. He sniffed, trying to stop it. It was no use. He turned his head away from Kale and the fungus garden, toward the blank wall of the entryway. The sneeze was not delicate. It was a loud, forceful human sound. Triple H-U. It echoed in the quiet apartment. Jiho shook his head, eyes watering. He heard the soft click of Kale's tool being set down. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, feeling embarrassed. He knew some species found human biological noises rude. "Ugh, sorry about that," he said, his voice still thick. He waved a hand in the air, as if he could shoo the apology toward Kale. Trying to lighten the moment, to make it seem more casual, he added the old, easy word he used with everyone. "Didn't mean to blast your plants, bro." The word hung in the cool air. Bro. For a moment, there was only the low hum of the life support systems. Then Jiho, still feeling too warm from his walk and the sudden sneeze, shrugged off his worn jacket. It was a simple thing made of synthetic fabric. He hooked it on the peg by the door, next to Kale's sleek, seamless environmental coat. When he turned back around, he finally saw Kale properly. Kale had fully turned from their plants. Their posture was utterly still, which was unusual. Kale was always moving with a gentle, fluid grace. Now they were frozen. Their large, dark eyes, which usually held a distant, observing look, were wide and fixed directly on Jiho. The delicate frills that framed their face, which Jiho had learned were like ears, were stiff and fully extended, pointing straight up. Jiho felt a knot of worry form in his stomach. This was more than just a complaint about noise or germs. This was a deep, profound stillness. Kale was looking at him not with anger or even annoyance. It was something else, something like shock or awe. "Hey," Jiho said, his casual tone feeling false. "You okay?" "It was just a sneeze. I think the city pollen filters are broken again." Kale did not answer. They did not move. Their gaze traveled slowly from Jiho's face, to the peg where his jacket hung, and back to his face. The intensity of it made Jiho want to fidget. "Right?" Jiho mumbled, filling the silence. "Well, I'm gonna go heat up these noodles. Do you, need anything?" Kale's head tilted just a fraction. It was a slow, considered movement. Finally, after what felt like a full minute, they gave a single, slow nod. It wasn't a nod to answer his question. It was different. It was a deliberate, formal acknowledgement. Then, without a word, Kale turned back to their fungus. But they did not pick up the spray tool. They simply stood, facing their glowing garden. Their stiff frills still pointed toward the ceiling, listening to a silence that had suddenly become very heavy. Jiho walked to the small kitchen area, his own ears now straining for any sound from his flatmate. All he could hear was the hum of the heater and the frantic beat of his own heart. He had no idea what he had just done. He only knew with complete certainty that everything between them had just changed. The cool, comfortable distance of their shared life was gone, replaced by something new and unknown. And it had all started with a sneeze, a single word, and a jacket taken off a tired human shoulder. Jiho woke to a smell he did not know. It was not the usual sterile air of the apartment, or the earthy scent of Kale's fungus. This was something rich and strange, like spices and slow-cooked grain. He came out of his room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The sight in the main room made him stop. The small table they sometimes used for meals, usually bare, was set with 2 polished stone bowls. Steam rose from them. Between the bowls was a central plate holding a kind of glossy, purple fruit sliced with perfect care. The lights were dimmed lower than usual. Kale stood beside the table. They were not moving. They waited. Good morning, Jiho said, his voice rough. Kale bowed. It was not a simple nod. It was a deep, formal gesture from the waist. Their slender hands were pressed together. They held the bow for a full 3 seconds before rising. "This is for you," Kale said. Their voice was soft, as always, but the tone was different. It was not the flat, polite tone from before. It was respectful. "It is Valesh, a traditional morning meal of my people. It is for important days." Jiho blinked. "For me? But why?" "It is my honor to provide," Kale said simply. They gestured to the chair. They did not sit themselves. Feeling completely lost, Jiho sat down. The food smelled incredible. He took a hesitant bite. It was complex and warm. "This is amazing, Kale." "Thank you." He meant it. But the situation made the food sit oddly in his stomach. Kale gave another small, formal bow of the head. Only then did they sit, but not to eat their own bowl. They watched Jiho eat. They seemed to be waiting for his approval. "This is really good," Jiho said again, feeling the need to fill the quiet. "Your satisfaction gives me purpose," Kale replied. Jiho almost choked. Purpose? What was happening? He finished the meal under Kale's quiet gaze. When he stood to take his bowl to the cleaner, Kale was instantly on their feet. "I will attend to it," they said, taking the bowl from his hands before he could argue. "Your time is for greater things. My time is for linguistics homework," Jiho said, trying to make a joke. Kale just tilted their head again, that same slow, considering movement. "Then I will ensure your space is perfect for study." For the rest of the morning, Jiho tried to work at his desk. He could not focus. He heard Kale moving quietly around the apartment. They were not doing their usual tasks. They were cleaning his things. They carefully straightened the pile of his data tablets. They wiped the dust from his chair. They even organized the small collection of his snacks by type. Every time Jiho said, "You don't have to do that," Kale would stop, bow slightly, and say, "It is my duty," before continuing. The worst moment came later. Jiho liked to watch the city lights from the window in the afternoon. It was his one small luxury. Kale was across the room, tending to their beloved fungus trays. Jiho walked to the window and sighed, leaning on the sill. "The new lights on the eastern spire are finally working," he said, thinking out loud. He heard a soft shuffle behind him. He turned. Kale was carefully picking up one of their fungus trays. They carried it across the room and placed it on a lower shelf, in a spot that got much less of the window's light. The fungus immediately seemed to pulse a little dimmer. "What are you doing?" Jiho asked, alarmed. "It won't grow well there." "This location has the best view," Kale said, their voice utterly sincere. "It is right for you to have it. The prime should have the best light." The word hit Jiho like a physical blow. Prime. It was a title, a big one. He had heard it in his xenocultural studies. It was a term for a leader, a ruler, a person of supreme authority. A cold feeling spread through his chest. This was not kindness. This was not even friendship. This was something else. This was devotion. And it was a prison. He was being put on a pedestal so high he couldn't even talk to the only other person in his home. The comfortable, equal space of their shared apartment was gone. In its place was a silent, sparkling museum, and he was the exhibit everyone had to tiptoe around. That evening, he called his friend Sumin on a private video link. He kept his voice low. "Hey Sumin, you know my flatmate Kale? The quiet fungus grower? Sure. Something's wrong. Really wrong." He explained the breakfast, the cleaning, the moving of the plants, the title. Sumin listened, her expression turning from curiosity to amusement. "Jiho, it sounds like you did something amazing for them. Did you save their life and forget?" "I sneezed," he hissed. "I sneezed. I said bro. And I took my jacket off." Sumin laughed. "Well, maybe in their culture that's how you pledge your eternal loyalty. Maybe your snot is magic." "This isn't funny," Jiho said, but his protest was weak. He was desperate for it to be a joke. "I think I've trapped them. I think they owe me something, and I don't know what it is or how to give it back." The humor faded from Sumin's face. "Oh, that is not good. Have you tried just talking to them? Telling them to stop?" "I'm afraid to," Jiho admitted, looking at his closed door. What if asking them to stop is the final, biggest insult? He felt utterly alone. The apartment walls, which once felt neutral, now felt like the walls of a very strange cage. He was the warden, and he didn't even know what crime he had committed. The silence was the loudest thing in the apartment. It was not an empty silence, but a heavy, watchful one. Jiho felt Kale's presence in every room, even when they were not there. He moved like a ghost in his own home, trying not to disturb the new, fragile order. He could not focus on his studies. The words on his data tablets blurred together. His mind was stuck on a single problem. What had he done? He needed to understand. He needed to fix it. He could not live in this museum of devotion. He waited until Kale left for their regular shift at the atmospheric processing station. The moment the door slid shut, Jiho went to his desk. He opened the university's xenocultural database. It was a vast, complex system of files about thousands of species. He had access as a linguistics student, but he had never searched for something so personal before. He started with the obvious. He typed, "Veth Collective, Social Customs, Sneeze." The search came back with almost nothing. A single footnote in a medical file about Veth respiratory systems. It noted they did not have a reflexive sneeze like humans. No cultural significance was listed. He tried again. Veth Collective, slang, informal address. Bro. The database had a translation matrix for common Veth words. There was no entry for bro. There was no entry for any casual, familial slang term. The Veth language, according to the notes, was highly structured and context-specific. There were 15 different words for respectful ally, depending on social standing. Frustration grew in him. He pushed his chair back and paced. Maybe it wasn't the sneeze or the word alone. Maybe it was the combination, the sequence. He sat down again. He thought about what he had done step by step. A biological action, a spoken word, a physical removal of an outer layer. He started a new search using broader terms. Veth Collective, rituals, bonding ceremonies. This gave him more. Many files were restricted, requiring a higher academic clearance. The summaries he could see spoke of long, elaborate rituals involving exchanged scents, spoken vows in formal gardens, and the presentation of woven frond circles. Nothing about apartments, sneezes, or jackets. One summary mentioned a rite of shared breath. His pulse jumped. He clicked it. The file was locked. The brief preview text read, "An archaic practice, largely symbolic in modern Veth society, believed to originate from pre-civilized clan behaviors, shared breath." He had expelled his breath right near Kale. Was that it? But it was just a sneeze. It was messy and accidental. He leaned forward, rubbing his temples. He was missing something. He went back to the idea of sequence. Action, word, then another action. What was the jacket? In the cold apartment, everyone wore an outer layer. What could taking it off mean? A new idea, strange and dark, entered his mind. He hesitated, then typed. Veth Collective, predator behavior, historical. The database returned a list of extinct fauna from the Veth homeworld. He scrolled past pictures of large herbivores and flying hunters. Then he saw it. An entry for a predator called a kethran. It was a large, six-limbed creature, now gone for millennia. The artist's rendering showed a powerful beast with a wide mouth. He opened the file. It was a dry, scientific description of bone structure and hunting patterns. His eyes scanned the text. Then, a sentence near the end made his blood run cold. The kethran was known for a distinctive behavioral sequence prior to engaging in a fatal clash with a rival. Bioacoustic analysis of fossilized larynx structures suggests it would first produce a forceful, wet exhalation, a roar snort, to clear its nasal passages and spread its scent. It would then vocalize a low, repeating sound believed to be a challenge cry. Finally, it would shake its body violently, dislodging loose outer scales or parasites, effectively shedding its hide in a display of readiness and dominance. This sequence is cited in several anthropological texts as a possible, though debated, cultural precursor to later Veth social rituals of confrontation and bonding. Jiho sat very still. The words danced in front of his eyes. Forceful, wet exhalation. A sneeze. A low, repeating sound. He had said, "Bro, shake its body, shedding its hide." He had taken off his jacket. It was a perfect, terrible match. A one-to-one translation of the actions of an ancient, terrifying predator. His stomach twisted. Was that what Kale saw? Did they think he had performed some ancient, dominant challenge? Did they think he was claiming the apartment as his territory, claiming them as a rival? Or as a possession? It seemed too crazy. It was the stuff of bad adventure stories. A human accidentally acts like a monster from an alien history book. Couldn't be real. But the evidence was there. The changed behavior. The deep bows. The title Prime. The giving of the best light. It wasn't about friendship. It was about hierarchy. It was about power. Kale wasn't being nice. They were submitting. A deep sadness washed over Jiho, followed by a wave of guilt. He had not meant any of it. He had been tired, allergic, and casual. He had been human. And in being human, he had somehow become a monster in his flatmate's eyes. A monster to be obeyed and feared. He closed the database. The glowing screen went dark, reflecting his own worried face back at him. The theory fit perfectly, but knowing what he might have done didn't tell him how to undo it. In fact, it made it seem much, much harder. How do you tell someone you didn't mean to act like the most dominant creature in their evolutionary past? How do you apologize for accidentally becoming their king? He looked at the door, dreading the sound of Kale's return. The apartment no longer felt like a cage. Now it felt like a throne room, and he was a king who never wanted the crown. The air between them had become a wall. Jiho felt it every time they were in the same room. Kale moved with a new, quiet purpose, serving and observing. Jiho moved with a growing sense of panic, trapped in a role he did not want. The breaking point was the light. Kale's prized fungus, moved to the dark shelf, was clearly suffering. Its blue glow was weaker, less steady. It hurt Jiho to see it. This was Kale's passion, their piece of home, and he was killing it with his passive presence. He found Kale carefully polishing the already clean surface of the kitchen unit. They did not look up as he approached. "Kale," Jiho said. His voice sounded too loud in the quiet. "We need to talk." Kale immediately stopped. They set the cloth down and turned, bowing their head in that formal way. "I am listening, Prime." That word again. It made Jiho's skin crawl. "Please don't call me that. My name is Jiho." Kale's frills twitched, a sign of confusion, but they said nothing. Jiho took a deep breath. He had rehearsed this. "Have I done something to offend you? Or something else? You've been so different. Since last week. Since I sneezed." For the first time in days, Kale's large, dark eyes lifted and truly met his. There was no fear there, and no anger. Instead, Jiho saw a deep, profound sincerity that was somehow worse. "Offend." Kale's voice was soft with wonder. "You performed the rite of the broken veil and shed bond. It is the most sacred of the old ways. The name hung in the air. It was beautiful and strange and completely terrifying. Jiho's theory from the database was real. The what? The right? Kale repeated, as if explaining something simple. The forceful sharing of breath, breaking the veil between two selves. The spoken vow name, binding the spirits. The shedding of the outer hide, showing a true self, ready for a new bond. They gestured gently toward the peg where Jiho's jacket still hung. You chose me for this honor. I did not think a human would know our oldest stories. Jiho felt the floor drop out from under him. It was so much bigger than he imagined. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't about dominance. It was about family. It was about the deepest bond their culture could imagine. Kale, he said, his voice cracking. That wasn't. I didn't. Kale tilted their head, waiting for wisdom. The sneeze. Jiho forced the words out. It was just a sneeze. My nose was itchy from the pollen. It was a biological accident. It didn't mean anything. Kale's frills slowly lowered, lying flat against their head. A Veth sign of distress. And the word, Jiho continued, desperate now. I said bro. It's not a vow name. It's not a binding title. It's just human slang. A casual word for a friend, like pal or mate. I say it to everyone. The confusion on Kale's face deepened into something like pain. Their slender hands, which had been still at their sides, curled slightly. And the jacket, Jiho finished, his own hands waving helplessly. I was just warm. I took it off because I didn't need it anymore. It's just a piece of clothing. It's not an outer hide. It's synthetic fabric from a shop on level 7. Silence crashed over them. It was thicker and heavier than before. Kale stood perfectly still. The glow from the sickly fungus pulsed slowly, casting shifting blue shadows on their face. Jiho watched as the understanding began to dawn. It was not a quick thing. It moved across Kale's features like a slow, cold shadow. The reverence in their eyes did not vanish, but it changed. It mixed with a dawning, horrible embarrassment. The sacred, ancient ritual, a gesture that would have required years of social negotiation and spiritual preparation in their society, had been a random series of human actions. The majestic predator's roar was a biological sneeze. The sacred vow was a casual colloquialism. The shedding of armor was removing a damp jacket. Kale took one small step back. It was a tiny movement, but in the still room it was like a gong had been struck. I see, Kale said finally. Their voice was so quiet it was almost a whisper. It was empty of all the formal respect. It was just hollow. A sequence of accidents. Yes, Jiho whispered, his heart aching. Just accidents. I am so sorry, Kale. I didn't know. Kale nodded slowly. They looked from Jiho to their fungus, now sitting in the bad light. They looked at the polished kitchen unit, at Jiho's jacket on the peg. They looked at everything they had been cleaning and arranging for the past week. They saw it all for what it was, a monument to a misunderstanding. Without another word, Kale turned. They walked, not with their usual fluid grace, but with a stiff, careful gait, to the door of their private room. They opened it, stepped inside, and let it slide shut behind them with a soft, final click. Jiho was left alone in the main room. The weight of the silence was now a crushing thing. He had told the truth. He had broken the spell. But as he stood there, he realized he had not fixed anything. He had only replaced a beautiful, terrifying lie with an ugly, awkward truth. And he had no idea what to do next. The distance between their rooms now felt like the distance between planets. The apartment felt dead. The quiet was no longer watchful. It was empty. Kale did not come out of their room. No sound came from behind the door. The fungus on the dim shelf pulsed weakly, a lonely heartbeat in the still air. Jiho sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands. He had done what he thought was right. He had told the truth, but the truth had only caused pain. He felt like he had taken something precious from Kale and smashed it on the floor, right in front of them. He needed advice. He needed someone who understood more than he did. He scrolled through his contacts, his fingers shaking. He found the name of his professor for interspecies communication, Dr. Alara. She was a Lorian, a species known for their calm logic and deep knowledge of galactic cultures. He sent her a brief, urgent message, asking if she had time to talk. To his surprise, a reply came quickly. A few minutes later, her calm, three-eyed face appeared on his data tablet screen. "Jiho, you look troubled." "Dr. Alara, thank you. I have a problem with my flatmate, a Veth, a cultural misunderstanding, a bad one." He told her everything. The sneeze, the word, bro, the jacket, Kale's reaction, his research into the Kethran predator, the confrontation, the rite of the broken veil and shed bond. He told her how he had explained it was all an accident. Dr. Alara listened without interruption. Her central eye blinked slowly. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Fascinating," she said finally. "The Kethran precursor theory is a minority view in mainstream Veth anthropology, but it is respected. You connected the dots correctly. But what do I do?" Jiho pleaded. "I didn't mean to do a ritual, but I did it. In their eyes, I completed it. So what now?" Dr. Alara steepled her delicate fingers. "The ritual is complete. That is the key fact. In Veth cultural logic, the actions were performed. The intent, which you explain was absent, is a secondary layer. To them, you have either performed a sacred act with profound ignorance, which is a kind of cosmic clumsiness, or you have performed a perfect mimicry of their most ancient bond with no feeling behind it, which is a kind of cruelty." Jiho's heart sank. Both options were terrible. "So I'm either a clumsy giant or a cruel monster." "In their current perception, perhaps," Dr. Alara said. "But perception can be managed. The ritual cannot be undone. The only question left is your intent now." "My intent now is to go back to being normal flatmates, to forget this ever happened." Dr. Alara's mouth, a thin line, seemed to soften. "That is not an option on the table, Jiho. You cannot unring a bell. The bond was declared. You must now either formally reject it, or you must find a way to honor the spirit of what they believe you offered." "Reject it? How?" "You would have to perform a formal counter-ritual. The unweaving. It involves spoken words of severance and the literal cutting of a shared object. It is a grave act. It states that the proposed bond is unacceptable. For a Veth, especially one living away from their collective, it would be a deep public shame. It would mark them as unworthy." Jiho saw it instantly. Kale, already isolated, being told by the person they thought had chosen them that they were, in fact, rejected. The thought made him sick. "No, I could never do that. That's horrible." "Then," Dr. Alara said gently, "you must consider the second path. Honor the spirit. You did not mean to perform the physical actions. But do you reject the idea of the bond itself?" Jiho thought. Did he reject Kale? No. They had been a good flatmate. Quiet, clean, respectful. He had liked their peaceful presence. He had been curious about them. He just didn't want to be their king or their brother from an ancient prophecy. "I don't reject them," he said slowly. I want to be equals, not prime and whatever I made them." "Then that is your starting point," Dr. Alara said. "You must find a new way to define the connection. A hybrid way. A human way, perhaps. You must communicate that while the old symbols were wrong, the underlying wish for a meaningful connection was not entirely an accident. You must make a new ritual, one you both understand." The screen blurred in front of Jiho. It sounded impossible. "How do I do that?" "I cannot give you the script, Jiho. You are the linguist. You must find the words. And more importantly, you must find the gesture. Something clear. Something honest. Something that says, the old rules do not apply, but a new agreement is possible. Good luck." The call ended. Jiho was left alone again with the quiet and the weight of a choice. He could not go back. He could not reject Kale and cause them that shame. That left only one path forward. He had to find a way to build a bridge over the wreckage of the old ritual. He had to find a gesture that was not a sneeze, a word that was not bro, and an offering that was not a jacket. He had to find a way to say, "I want to be your friend," in a language that had just been completely broken. He looked at the closed door to Kale's room, a knot of anxiety and determination tightening in his chest. Jiho did not sleep. The words of Dr. Ilera turned in his mind. You must find a new ritual, a human way. He thought about human connections. They were not usually one grand ceremony. They were built from small things. Shared meals, helping with a task, a simple agreement. He thought about Kale hiding in shame. He thought about the dying fungus in the dark. That was where it had to start. In the morning, he moved quietly. He went to the dim shelf and carefully picked up the tray of fungus. The blue light was faint, like a weak star. He carried it back to its original spot by the window, where the soft glow of the city's artificial day could reach it. He adjusted the angle just the way he had seen Kale do it 100 times. He then went to the small kitchen. He did not try to make Valesh. He did not know how. Instead, he made 2 cups of strong black tea the way he always drank it. He placed the cups on the small table. He did not set out special fruits or bow. He just put the cups down and sat in his usual chair. He waited. He waited for a long time. The tea stopped steaming. The city lights brightened fully outside. Finally, the door to Kale's room slid open. Kale emerged. They looked tired. Their frills were pressed close to their head. They saw their fungus back in the good light. They saw Jiho sitting at the table. They stopped, uncertain. "Please," Jiho said, his voice calm. He pointed to the other chair. "Will you sit with me?" Kale hesitated. This was not a command from a prime. It was a request from a flatmate. Slowly, they walked over and sat down. They did not look at him. They looked at their hands on the table. "I spoke to a teacher," Jiho began. "She helped me understand. I know I cannot undo what happened. Right." He said the word carefully. "It happened. My actions made it happen, even without my heart behind it." Kale's fingers twitched. "I have a choice," Jiho continued. "I could do the unweaving, the severance." He saw Kale's whole body go very still, bracing for a blow. "I will not do that. I could never do that to you." A slight release of tension flowed through Kale's shoulders. "So," Jiho said, taking a slow breath, "we are stuck with a bond we did not mean to make. The old words for it are wrong. The broken veil was a sneeze. The shed bond was a jacket." He leaned forward a little, trying to catch Kale's downcast eye. But the feeling underneath, the wish to share a space, to not be strangers, that part wasn't all an accident. Kale's head lifted. Their large, dark eyes met his, full of wary confusion. "I did not know your way to say, 'Let's be good flatmates,'" Jiho said. "So I used my way, and it was a mess. I am sorry for that mess. But I am not sorry for," he searched for the word, "for the wanting." He reached his hand out across the table, not to take Kale's hand, but to place his own, palm up, in the space between them. It was a human gesture, an offering. "Where I come from," Jiho explained, his voice steady, "this is a sign. It is for making a promise between equals. It is called a handshake. You take my hand, and we agree on something. A deal. Pact. A fresh start." Kale stared at the offered hand. They looked from the hand to Jiho's face, searching for falsehood or pity. They saw only sincere, awkward hope. "What would we be agreeing to?" Kale asked, their voice barely a whisper. "To a new ritual," Jiho said. "Our own. One with no ancient predators in it. We agree that I am not your prime. You are not my servant. We are Jiho and Kale. We share the rent. We share the light for the plants. We are quiet in the morning. We help each other if we ask. We are flatmates. Maybe, in time, we could be friends." He left his hand there open and waiting. It was a simple thing, a human thing. After the grand, terrible drama of the Veth rite, it felt small and fragile. Kale looked at their own slender hand. They slowly lifted it from the table. They did not understand the gesture, but they understood the intention. It was a proposal, a new definition, Not a bond forced by ancient accident, but a bond chosen now, with clear eyes. They reached out. Their cool, smooth fingers touched Jiho's palm. Their grip was tentative, not strong like a human handshake. Jiho closed his hand gently around theirs, giving one slow, firm shake, and then let go. The pact was made. A silence followed, but it was different. It was not heavy or watchful. It was the silence of two people who had just finished a very difficult conversation. The air in the room seemed to clear, just a little. Kale looked at their fungus, now back in the light. They looked at their cup of cold tea. They gave a small, slow nod, not a bow of submission, but a nod of understanding. Flatmates, Kale repeated, testing the word. Yes, Jiho said. He picked up his cold tea and took a sip. It was bitter, but it felt right. Kale, after a moment, picked up their own cup and did the same. They did not smile. Veth did not smile. But the terrible stiffness was gone from their posture. The deep embarrassment began to recede, replaced by a cautious, fragile peace. The grand, mistaken ritual was over. In its place was a simple, quiet agreement, sealed with a handshake and a cup of cold tea. It was not much, but for the first time in over a week, it felt like enough. It felt like a foundation they could both stand on. Time moved differently after the handshake. It did not snap back to how it was before. That old, easy distance was gone forever. Instead, something new began to grow, slowly and carefully, like one of Kale's fungi in fresh soil. The first change was the light. Kale did not move their plants again. They kept them by the window where they thrived. The blue glow grew stronger and steadier, casting its soft patterns on the wall each evening. Jiho would sometimes look up from his studies and watch it, and it no longer felt like an accusation. It was just a nice light. The second change was in the small things. Kale stopped making elaborate valesh. Jiho missed the taste, but he did not ask for it. That meal belonged to the old ritual. Instead, sometimes Kale would make a simple broth from imported Veth spices. They would place a bowl for Jiho on the counter without a word, not as an offering to a prime, but as one might leave a spare key for a flatmate. Jiho would eat it and say, "This is good. Thank you." And Kale would give a single nod. Jiho, in turn, stopped tiptoeing. He would sneeze if he needed to, though he tried to turn away. He would say hey or morning instead of bro. He left his jacket on the peg, but it was just a jacket again. One afternoon, Jiho was struggling. He had a complex translation matrix for his class, and the syntax was tying his brain in knots. He groaned and pushed back from his desk, running his hands through his hair. From across the room, a soft voice spoke. "Is the task not correct?" Jiho looked over. Kale was observing him, their head tilted in that familiar way, but now it seemed curious, not watchful. "It's just really hard," Jiho said. "These sentence structures don't map to anything in BASIC. It's like trying to describe a color I've never seen." Kale was quiet for a moment. Then they stood and walked over. They looked at the symbols on Jiho's screen. "It is a Lorian poetic form," they said. "It is not meant to be logical. It is meant to be felt in sequence, like water over stones. You are translating the stones, but not the water." It was the most Kale had ever said about his work. It was also completely correct. Jiho blinked. "How do you know that?" "I process atmospheric data. The formulas have a similar flow." Kale pointed a slender finger at a cluster of symbols. "This group is a modifier. It applies not to the word before it, but to the feeling of the entire previous line." It was a small thing, a moment of help, but it was offered freely, not out of duty. Jiho followed the advice, and the matrix began to make a new kind of sense. "Thank you," he said, and he meant it deeply. Kale gave their single nod and returned to their plants. Weeks passed. The season in the city sector changed again. One evening, they were both in the main room. Jiho was reading. Kale was pruning their fungus with a tiny tool. The comfortable silence was broken by the low beep of the food delivery unit. Jiho got up to retrieve it. It was his order, a large, messy Earth-style pizza in a box. He brought it to the table, the rich smell of cheese and spices filling the cool air. He opened the box, took a slice, and then paused. He looked at Kale, who was watching the process with polite interest. An idea came to him. It was not a grand gesture. It was the opposite. "Would you like to try some?" Jiho asked. "It's just human food. It's not a ritual. It's pizza." Kale looked at the steaming slice, then at Jiho. They set their tool down. They walked over and sat at the table. They carefully picked up a slice, mimicking Jiho. They took a small, cautious bite. They chewed slowly. Their frills twitched. Their large eyes widened just a fraction. "The texture is chaotic," they observed. "But the flavor combination is efficient." Jiho laughed. It was the first real laugh in the apartment in a long time. "That's one way to put it." They ate together, sitting at the same table. There were no bows, no titles, no special bowls. There was just shared food and a quiet conversation about the chaotic efficiency of human cooking. Later, after the box was empty, they both cleaned up. Jiho put the box in the recycler. Kale wiped the table. They worked side by side, not in a hierarchy of servant and served, but as two people who shared a space. That night, as Jiho got ready for bed, he saw Kale at the window. They were looking out at the city lights, their fungus glowing peacefully beside them. They seemed at ease. Jiho realized then what had been built. It was not the profound, mystical bond of the rite of the broken veil. It was not the casual, ignorant distance they had before. It was something in the middle, something real. It was trust earned through awkward honesty. It was respect built on a cleared-up misunderstanding. It was the quiet company of someone who finally knew you, flaws and accidental sneezes and all. He did not have a sacred vow name for Kale. He just had their name, Kale. And Kale did not have a title for him. They just called him Jiho. It was simple. It was basic. It was enough. In the vast, strange galaxy, in a cold apartment on a hub planet, two beings from different worlds had found a way to share the light. And that, in its own small way, was its own kind of miracle.